Sovereignty wins the Belmont. Good cheer tastes defeat for the first time, and an emotional weekend for Miguel Clement. Let's talk about it on the Win Play Show. Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to another episode of the Win Play Show, where I cover all of the latest topics in horse racing, handicapping, and betting. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, specialty content, and so much more. We have a great episode of Right or Wrong with Nick Zito and Kaylee Shapiro up right now on the YouTube page, where they interview Bob Baffert. That's right. We got the Hall of Famer to sit down with them for 35 minutes. An amazingly expansive interview. You don't want to miss it. They talk of Faro. They talk Justify. They talk Bob's start and the 2-year-old sales. They talk about a lot of different stuff. So you definitely want to make sure to stick around. They trade some great stories. Nick Zito, hysterical every single time. Nick and Bob have a great relationship. So it's great to see the two of them interacting. Kaylee, I thought, did a great job on the interview as well. So definitely want to make sure to check that out. All right. Well, let's dive into what was an incredible Belmont Stakes Racing Festival. And listen, let's not bury the lead. We're going to get to Miguel Clement and that incredibly emotional week that he had. We're going to talk about good cheer. We're going to talk about some other big performances throughout the week. But we have to talk about Sovereignty, and we have to talk about that performance in the Belmont Stakes. A truly incredible effort there from Sovereignty. And just a great race altogether where the big boys showed up and they fired. And that was a feeling that I had at the track. I said, I was on journalism. I had Sovereignty second. Kaylee was all over Sovereignty from last October and was, that was her top horse. She had journalism second. It was not a race to get cute. And when you finally started to see them in person, that became that much more obvious. They were not going to run bad races. Like, you just saw them physically and you're like, this horse is going to fire. This horse is going to run a huge race. Nobody looked as good as the two of them. And I remember seeing them on the walkover. Kaylee and I were recording them. We were kind of running to watch the race, and then we were going to do the race preview or the race review and recap afterwards. And Kaylee looked at me and she goes, nobody looks better than our two horses. And that was the way they ran. Sovereignty, though, wow, what an effort. And showed a new dimension that I think might have surprised Umberto Rispoli and Michael McCarthy and maybe even Bill Mott a little bit, which is showed that tactical speed to be sitting a pocket trip, was sitting third early on. This is a horse that always comes from the back of the pack, and suddenly negated that advantage that journalism typically has of sitting closer to the pace, of laying closer, of getting that first run. And all of a sudden, that advantage is gone. Journalism, it doesn't have that 5, 6, 7 length advantage over Sovereignty. Now they're on even terms. One of the things I said was, and one of the reasons I picked journalism was, I thought journalism would lay very close, and I thought Sovereignty would be at the back of the field. And I thought that's the sort of cushion that journalism needs to hold off Sovereignty, basically. He needs 4, 5, 6 lengths to hold him off. If they're on even terms, if you had told me going into the first term they're running neck and neck, I don't know what the live odds would have been, but I would have put all my money on Sovereignty at that point, because journalism needs that advantage. Because once Sovereignty gets rolling, that turn of foot just is not going to be stopped. And journalism made the first run, and Rispoli kept that horse wide the entire time. And it wasn't a bad decision. And I think certainly after what we saw in the Preakness, it was maybe the right decision. You kept journalism out of trouble the whole way along. He gave up ground the whole way around. I don't think that made any difference in terms of the outcome of the race, but he kept him wide. I think the fact that he was 3 wide in that first turn was maybe a little surprising. Uncaged showed a lot more speed, I think, early on than they were anticipating. And again, Sovereignty did too. So I think journalism thought, oh, maybe I could tuck over in the 2-path, maybe even get to the rail. That didn't happen. He's hung 3 wide, going around both turns. He makes the first run and gets to the lead. Does it pretty easily over Rodriguez and Crudo. And, for a moment, it looks like Sovereignty's kind of stuck inside a little bit. And you go, well, maybe journalism got the jump. Maybe that's the key. And maybe he's going to be able to hold him off. But once Sovereignty kicked out and got in the clear, it was over. I mean, that was obvious. Once I saw that first stride where Junior was like, let's go, and just pushed down on his neck. And I saw that first stride. I was like, this thing's done. at that point, that you just knew he was going to track him down and get to him. So just an incredible performance by Sovereignty to win by 3 widening lengths. Journalism second, Baeza third by I think another 3 lengths. And yeah, the top 3 ran the top 3. And the top 3 from the Derby ran back, and this is the top 3 in the Belmont. And I believe, I want to credit Ron Flatter on this, it is only the 4th time ever that the same top 3 from the Derby ran as the top 3 in the same order as the Belmont. Or maybe not the same order, but this top 3 in the Derby came back as the top 3 in the Belmont. So it's really amazing to see that. And yeah, there is no need to get cute. I think people thought, well, maybe I can pick Baeza up top. Baeza is a nice horse. And I told you this all week. Baeza is a very nice horse. I'd love to own Baeza. Baeza is not Dornoch, and he's not Mage. He really isn't. He's a nice horse, but I think he needs more time to develop. Physically, he needs to fill out more. He doesn't look like Good Magic. He doesn't look like Puka. He looks more like McKinsey. Your opinion on that might depend on, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But, it's going to be interesting to see how he continues to develop as a horse. Obviously, I mean, listen, he's 3-time Grade 1 placed, second in the Santa Anita Derby, third the Kentucky Derby, third in the Belmont. This is no slouch of a horse. And could beat just about anyone if it wasn't for Sovereignty and Journalism. But he happened to be born in an unfortunate year, perhaps, with 2 freakishly good horses. Now, listen, it was also a fast track by the time they ran. So you didn't have the muddy, wet track conditions. Yes, there was still moisture in the track, but it was a fast track by that point. Sovereignty earns a 108, 109 buyer speed figure. Journalism comes back with a 105. They ran their races, man. They fired. They put on a show for the people. An incredible effort there. And one beautiful sportsmanship afterwards. Umberto Rispoli riding up to Junior and Sovereignty and giving and embracing Junior, giving Sovereignty a pat, Junior reaching over and petting Journalism, really showed incredible sportsmanship. Mike McCarthy congratulating Bill Mott and really some kind words there. So it was great to see that. Now, listen, people already in the comments, I know I've read, or from a reaction video, people said, well, but listen, it wasn't on the square. One of those horses was 5 weeks rested, and the other was coming in on his 3rd race in 5 weeks. There's no way to get around that, okay? It's true. Sovereignty skipping the Preakness, going straight to the Saratoga and preparing for the Belmont, whereas Journalism traveled to Pimlico, ran that huge race. That was massive effort, and then comes up to Saratoga, trains, and now runs his 3rd race in 5 weeks. The only horse in the field to run all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. I don't think it would have made a difference. Counter hypotheticals are always impossible to kind of prove or disprove in that regard. And I think it will just continue to formulate a debate amongst horse racing fans. What if Sovereignty had tried to run in the Preakness? Would he have won that race? Would he have come back and look as fresh in the Belmont? Would he have been able to beat Journalism in that spot? We'll see. We'll never know. But I feel like the people who are against Sovereignty because of Bill Mott and because of some of Mott's quotes and some of this decision to skip the Preakness, etc., those people will always have fuel for themselves, because there's already talk about McCarthy saying, listen, Journalism's going to go back to California. He's going to rest for a little bit. But Jim Dandy and Travers are very much so on the table. And I think, again, even if they meet up again in the Jim Dandy and the Travers and Sovereignty gets the best of them again, I think those same people can go, well, one of those horses is traveling across the country and the other horse just stays in his own backyard. And there's always going to be that excuse for Journalism. And listen, I'm maybe one of the biggest fans of that horse. So I'm not saying those excuses are not justified. I'm not saying Michael McCarthy or the horse are looking for excuses. I'm just saying people who support him and who are trying to almost rooting against Sovereignty in some way are always going to have that built-in argument of, well, he gets to hang out in his own backyard and Journalism's always the one traveling and going across the country. Same thing could be said for a horse like Forever Young, who I think last year, if Forever Young ran against, coming from Japan, if Forever Young ran against Sierra Leone and Fierceness in Dubai, it wouldn't have even been a race. I mean, Forever Young would have smoked those two by 5 lengths. But he was constantly coming into our backyard, quarantining, going through that process, and having to run on North American tracks. But listen, with Journalism, that debate's going to rage on until the Breeders' Cup Classic. when one of those, when Sovereignty now is going to have to fly out to California and face journalism in his backyard. Now, the thing about the Breeders' Cup Classic, there's a little horse named White Barrio. There's a horse named Fierceness. There's a horse maybe named Nisos. There's a lot of other horses that might have something to say about who wins that Breeders' Cup Classic. It's certainly not going to be a 2-horse race. So, like I said, incredible performance from Sovereignty. And I think, you just have to think we're really fortunate to see a great horse. And this is not taking anything away from the last couple of the last few Triple Crowns at all. But, the Mystic Dan, Sees the Gray, Dornoch last year. Okay. Nice horses. And Dornoch, I think, is probably the best of that group, actually. But nice horses. Mystic Dan just came back, finally got a win. I was happy to see that. It had been 1,225 days since a Derby winner had won a subsequent race. And then 2 of them won it in a span of a week. So that's a good thing. And we're happy for that. I'm happy for that. I was sick and tired of keeping up with this. And, but the previous years, the Derby winners felt, Rich Strike and then Mage, you just didn't really get a sense that there was this great horse. And I feel like this year, not only do we have one of them, I think we have 2 of them. And that's really special to be able to have 2 great horses that seem like they're going to continue to battle against each other. And that's awesome. So thrilling Belmont Stakes, day and a thrilling Belmont Stakes. Obviously, the weather had a great deal of impact with Manhattan and the Jaipur being moved from Saturday to Sunday. Obviously, that was something which impacted wagering, impacted the broadcast and the coverage and the timing of the races, etc. But I will tell you, it rained a lot. It rained a lot up there. And for people who said, oh, you should just move it, you should move everything back a day. Easier said than done. This is something that you plan this out. You talk to the people at Churchill, you talk to people at Pimlico, they'll tell you the same thing. You start planning this stuff 7-8 months out. Calling an audible 3-5 days before is just not feasible. And oh, by the way, it rained on Sunday night and then Monday up there. So, this idea, just move everything back a day. Yeah, it's not that easy. So it was one of those things where I think we did the best we could with what we had. And we saw some great performances on Saturday. You saw Raging Torrent win that Met Mile over Fierceness. It was frustrating for me because I knew Fierceness wasn't going to win, and I knew White Barrio wasn't going to win. And I thought Just a Touch was going to win, and then Raging Torrent won. And so I was out on the top 2, and I knew I felt so confident about that. I'm sure every single bettor here has had an experience like that, where where you're right about fading the top choices and you're wrong about which horse is going to get the job done. And it's incredibly frustrating because you're like, man, I got 95% of the way there. I just got the wrong horse. And so Raging Torrent, what a performance from him, gate to wire. His last 3 wins. You talk about a horse that travels, the Malibu, the Godolphin Mile, and the Met Mile. California, Maidan, New York. That's a horse that horse's form travels for Doug O'Neill. And, it was as simple as he got out up front and it was see you later. And Fierceness kind of loomed up and couldn't really get past. And Just a Touch and White Barrio just kind of ran in place by and large, didn't really make much of an impact. I know White Barrio, the plan is, I think, for them to come back for the Whitney. I think going 2 turns is when he's at his best. I think that 1.5 turn configuration is a little funky, and it does contribute to front end speed. I think in this sort of a situation a lot. So I think it really contributed and helped Raging Torrent. And I was always worried about Fierceness with that inside draw and somebody kind of crossing over in front of him. And, Fierceness can be a quirky horse. And that race came back slow. Raging Torrent got a 94 Beyer speed figure. Fierceness got a 90. Remember, this is one race after he set the track record at Churchill Downs with a 109 Beyer speed figure, going a mile and a 16th in the Ali Sheba. So, the fact that he, was, regressed so significantly and was so slow was really telling. The Woody, or I should say not the Woody Stevens, the True North. What a race that was as well between Mulligan and Bookham Danno. And is there a cooler horse in training right now than Bookham Danno? I don't think there is. I think Bookham Danno is the coolest. And he is so awesome and tries so hard every single time. And I love the connection so much. And I am such a big fan of the fact that Buchero is now standing up here in New York. who is, of course, Danno's sire, as he was New Jersey bred at the time. But now he's up in New York, and excited to see a lot of baby Bucheros up here in New York in the next couple of years. But he runs so hard coming off that very narrow fourth place finish. I think fourth by a head, if I'm not mistaken, in that Churchill Downs Stakes against Banishing, Mindframe, and Nisos. And so he comes back in that True North, battles Mulligan, and gets past him in the stretch, and just great effort there from Danno. Just what a cool horse. I love that horse. And he loves Saratoga too. He won the Woody Stevens. That's what I was thinking of the Woody Stevens. He won the Woody Stevens the year before with that epic pace meltdown, where they went way too fast up front. But speaking of the Woody Stevens, great effort from Patch Adams. I think that's a horse that now is really always felt like a horse that was probably going to be best around one turn. His 2 victories at 7 furlongs have been incredibly impressive. Coming from off the pace, beating Matticat Road, who finished second. Citizen Bull finished fourth for Bob Baffert. So the Baffert horses cutting back, I think running well. I think both their futures, I think going one turn in all likelihood. But, that was a great effort there from Brad Cox for Patch Adams cutting back. He's an exciting horse. Listen, that 3-year-old sprint division is always one of my favorites because all these Derby horses that cut back that really weren't made for going 2 turns, and that they were just precocious, and the connections thought, hey, we take a shot at the Derby, and ultimately we're a 7 furlong or a 1-turn mile type of a horse, and now you're getting to see them do their best. So that Woody Stevens and then the H. Allen Jerkins, I can't wait for those races this summer, but a big effort there from Patch Adams for sure. Another huge effort was from a filly in an off-turf race in the Wonder Again, Nitrogen. Put on a show. Yes, it was a 3-horse field. Yes, it was off turf. She ran a 91 Beyer speed figure. And her final time in a canter, she was eased up at the end. Her final time going a mile, because remember, they when races at Saratoga go off turf that are a mile and a 16th, they end up being run at a mile out of the Wilson Shoe. And so that race was only 0.27 seconds slower than Raging Torrent in the Met Mile. Hello. If she had tried, if she had been asked the whole way, forget about it. She would have run a triple-digit number for sure. She handled that dirt just fine. And now I'm sure they'll put her back on the turf for Mark Casse. But, man, talk about the luxury. He's got a filly, a 3-year-old filly that he can feel confident if a race ever gets rained off, no reason to worry about that. She can handle that track just fine. She won by 17 lengths. 17 lengths. That's ridiculous. And just easy 17 lengths. And again, I know it was 2 other horses, off turf race, I understand. But just as a display of handling the track and speed and capability, it was really impressive to see what she could do. So she had already stamped herself as a top 3-year-old turf filly. But I think when you combine her effort with the defeat of Good Cheer, that happened the day before. Good Cheer loses in the Acorn to La Cara. I think now there's a discussion. Is Nitrogen just the best 3-year-old filly? Full stop. Regardless of surface. Maybe so. Good Cheer was a perfect 7 for 7 coming into that race. Conditions were not great. It was raining. It was sloppy. It was sealed. Similar to what she did on Oaks Day in Kentucky. But again, track composition's a little bit different between Churchill and Saratoga. So, the track plays a little bit differently. Not every horse takes to it. La Cara got out up front and was not pressed. That's the biggest difference, is La Cara gets up front and Scottish Lassie kind of goes. McCarthy's horse Look Forward kind of goes. But nobody's really applying pressure to La Cara, who's able to get alone and comfortable on the lead. Yeah, she's clicking off fast fractions. But as Casse always said, if she's able to set her own pace, nobody's beating her. Now he goes, if somebody presses her, we might not win, but I guarantee that other horse isn't going to win who presses her. So it's a little bit of a foolhardy mission to kind of go against La Cara. But we saw Tenma willing to do that in the Kentucky Oaks, where Tenma went after her early and really pressed her for fractions, and La Cara folded like a chair and couldn't sustain that. Well, when you get her up front on a sloppy sealed track that tends to be good for front end speed, yeah, she was able to hold on and do well. Good Cheer didn't really take to it, didn't really fire, didn't run a bad race, but just didn't run as good of a race as she was probably capable of, or what everybody was certainly expecting out of her, especially after the scratch of Shred the Gnar, which really changed the complexion of the race. Because Shred the Gnar is in that race, that horse is going at La Cara. And if Shred the Gnar goes at La Cara, two things happen. One, La Cara is not winning. And two, maybe Good Cheer is able to get a little bit more pace to run into, and maybe the field comes back to her, even if she doesn't necessarily fire a huge race. So, maybe one of the other horses kind of ends up firing that day. Bless the Broken, or who knows? Scottish Lassie or somebody like that. So, it was like I said, a really impressive effort from La Cara, who I've never been the biggest fan of, because I do feel she's vulnerable when she's pressed. But like I said, once Shred the Gnar scratched, then that race really set up nicely for her. It was hard to make a case against her at that point as front end speed. But here's the thing. Good Cheer tastes defeat for the first time. You think, oh, poor Brad Cox. What's he going to do? Oh, by the way, he's just rolling out a little filly I like to name Immersive this weekend in the Monomoy Girl at Churchill Downs. Remember, folks, Immersive was the champion 2-year-old filly. She was the star of the Brad Cox barn last year. A perfect 4-for-4. Absolutely dominated that Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies last year at Del Mar that I was there for. One of the most impressive efforts I had seen outside of maybe Lake Victoria. And an incredible filly. She had a little bit of an injury and a setback. She's back now. She's been training for a while. She's running on Saturday at Churchill Downs in the Monomoy Girl. So the Brad Cox machine for the fillies, it's not skipping a beat. Good Cheer might go to it sounds like Good Cheer's not going to go to the bench, but it's going to get maybe a couple weeks off, get back into training, then they'll target something later this summer. But now we're ready to roll with Immersive. That's a dangerous one. I mean, if she's able to come back, and if she's moved forward from 2 to 3, she's a really good filly too. So, I mean, I'm excited to see that as well. That's a whole nother filly to bring into that discussion. So excited for that, obviously. But yeah, just incredible efforts across all of those days of racing. And a couple of big performances, obviously, on Sunday that I wanted to touch on. One of those was AG Bullet winning the Jaipur. What an effort. What a mare. Something about gray mares in that turf sprint division. Caravel did it a few years ago. Now AG Bullet coming in from California. To come in from California to handle a softer ground and to handle a turf course that is usually not favorable for West Coast horses because it's something they're unused to see that turf form travel and to see her get that sort of a trip and run so well, just incredibly impressive effort. So AG Bullet, wow. I can't wait to see when she runs again. Hopefully she comes back for the Troy, some of these other big turf sprint races that we used to have, that we still do have, but that Caravel used to go to and things like that. So can't wait for her to run back. Hopefully see her again in Saratoga this summer. And then obviously we got to talk about the last race of the whole weekend, the Manhattan and Deterministic. The week started on Wednesday with an emotional moment. The last race of the day on Wednesday was won by Miguel Clement. It was his first win as a trainer after the passing of his father, Christophe Clement, who was an icon and a fixture of New York racing. And I didn't realize how sick Christophe was. It sounds like really it was just people that were very close to him who had maybe seen him over the winter. Being up here in New York, I didn't see him at all over the winter, so I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. And so the news of his passing was stunning, truly stunning, and very sad for all of us up here in New York, because a lot of us have gotten to know not only Christophe and Miguel, but obviously Acacia, and to know, to see people that you care for going through that sort of a hard time is always a challenge. And there was always a succession plan, but geez, at 59, you just didn't expect to lose Christophe that soon. And so Miguel takes over and saddles his first winner on Wednesday in that final race. And an emotional moment in the winner's circle. Family, very emotional, Acacia. And even I heard the owners of the losing horse come in and congratulate Miguel and go, I've never been so happy to lose a race before. And I think that was the prevailing sentiment. Everybody was so happy for Miguel to get that first win, get off the schneid, get the monkey off his back, whatever expression you want to use. But to get that first win on Wednesday at Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, really special. And then to close out Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, the very last race on the Manhattan, Deterministic, who could have been Christophe's Derby horse had he chosen to run that horse in the Derby, and after winning the Gotham, and he chose not to. And he had the points. He could have gone and chose not to. And he said that, that horse's future was on the turf. And Deterministic under Kendrick Carmouche got such a great ride. Kendrick really has figured something out with this one the last couple of times. It just go straight to the lead. Don't screw around. Go straight to the lead. You could do a mile and an eighth up on the lead. And a front running ride under Kendrick. And who does he hold off? Integration. Now, that's poetic for Kendrick, because if you remember, Integration, the Shug McGahee horse, is the horse that Kendrick got taken off of in favor of Tyler Gaffalione when Kendrick had done nothing wrong on that horse and won a couple of races, including the Virginia Derby, on Integration. And Shug made the decision to make a rider change to Tyler, who's probably a little bit more, heralded on the turf as a turf rider. And Kendrick, I think, rode Integration a couple more times. I want to say he rode him again in one of those races down at Colonial, or maybe he lost to Fev Rover. But he ran a couple more times. But it had to have been poetic for Kendrick to hold off Integration with Deterministic to win that Grade 1 Manhattan. And of course, this is then Miguel's first Grade 1 as a trainer. Again, not a dry eye on the house. An extremely emotional winner's circle. And just a great moment. Kendrick, interviewed by Maggie afterwards, was just that was a really special moment as well. On horseback, Kendrick with some amazing words there. And just an amazing way to end the weekend, with Deterministic getting that Grade 1 win in the Manhattan over Integration, over Farbridge. And what an effort. And I do have to say, I got to give my good friend Brian Courtney, Acacia's dad, a little bit of grief. And I don't know if Brian's still watching, but the day before I told him, I said, I really like Deterministic. I said, I picked Integration as my top choice. And I said, I don't know. I said, I think Deterministic's a pretty good horse. I said, I really like him in this spot. And he goes, well, he kind of hems on. He's like, I don't know if he's going to like the softer ground. And he goes, Carson's Run and Farbridge, they don't mind softer ground. I don't know about Deterministic. And I thought, well, maybe you're right. Maybe the softer ground is going to make a difference. And, no, Deterministic handled the softer grounds. I got to give Brian some grief about that. I had the wrong horse up top, but I had the right top too. Just didn't have them in the right order. But that was, like I said, what a way to end the weekend. And, just a really incredible moment. So, listen, this week, though, we got a lot of great content as well, because we got some great racing down at Monmouth for Pegasus Day down there, which is Haskell Preview Day. We got the Monomoy Girl, which we're going to have a preview of up there on NYRA Bets, so you can check that out. And we're going to have a Capping the Card on the Pegasus Day, Haskell Preview Day card at Monmouth. And then, listen, we're going to have a lot of more content coming up for you, getting you ready for Saratoga, getting you ready for Royal Ascot. That's right. If you go to NYRA Bets, we already have a bunch of stuff up for Royal Ascot. So we're going to have a lot of that ready for you for next week. So we're going to have a lot of content for you here on NYRA Bets YouTube. So you definitely want to press that like and subscribe button today. All right, folks. My name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you, it is now post time.